This game was played in a recent over-the-board OCF chess tournament. It is the last round game, and we are playing for first place in state. This is a state championship, so there is a lot to play for here. My opponent was a very strong fight master, Sergey Galant. We had never played before, but I had watched him play throughout the tournament here and there, and he was also very dominant. He was crushing his opponents. So this game I did expect a fight, but I wasn't really prepared for one. I was tired from the tournament, and I did think seriously about drawing, but I also wanted to play my best. So let's go ahead and take a look at this. He starts off with e4, and e4, I have a lot of trouble with this. I tried different opening systems over the years, and as I've been learning the opening more, I have come up with some good ways to deal with e4. Here he played g3, and it is indeed playable, but I thought it was a bit too passive. In fact, it does allow me to have a slight advantage early on. I thought that white would be better off playing for the center, maybe with a d4 pawn thrust, or even knight f3, just some way to control the center some more. Playing g3 allows me to build up in the center. d5, and I had thought about this move for a while, and I was really seriously thinking d6, which is an acceptable move, but something told me that I had better than d6. And indeed, I feel like d5 is a little bit better. If I play d6, then my opponent can play c4, creating this huge bind on d5, and it's very difficult for me to break open the center. He might even have ideas of playing c5 at some point and creating a weakness on d6, a backward pawn, which he can later attack. So I wasn't too thrilled about d6. It also blocks in my dark squared bishop. But then I saw that d5 was indeed playable, since he had moved his knight off of c3. And at this point I did sense that I was better, but I wasn't sure exactly how best to improve my position. Here I felt like I had at least a draw, and but I wanted to try and win if I could. Queen takes d4. So here I played knight b4 because it goes after the c2 pawn, which is one of his primary weaknesses in this position. There are a couple ways that he could respond to this. He could take my queen and then defend c3 with his bishop or another piece. Or he can take my queen and then move the c-pawn. Or he can move his queen back and defend. During the game, he played their best move, queen c3, but I thought that queen c3 made the queen more of a target, and it seemed like it was not the best. Let's take a look at queen takes. Here white will end up with a slight disadvantage, but he probably will be able to draw it. It's the endgame, and without the queens on the board, I don't have this huge attack. So you could play something like this, and then knight d3 would have been my idea. The point here is that my knight is well placed. I have an open file with the rook already on it. His knight on a4 is a bit passive, and I do have ideas of possibly capturing on b2. So black has more activity, but white can probably manage a draw here. So I didn't have a whole lot in this position, I did have a slight advantage, and perhaps that might have been better to neutralize my attack early on. After queen c3, bishop f5, and here I'm just trying to attack c2. I'm not worried about dropping my b7 pawn because I want to continue this attack and press him as much as possible. Bishop takes, knight takes c2. Now rook to b8 was also playable. After that we see queen f3, and the computer raised this position as black has a slight edge, but not much more. White will be able to equalize. So I didn't go down that variation because I wanted to keep the attack going and to keep the position really active. So after knight takes, we see queen f3. There's another alternative here. Why not bishop takes rook, queen takes, and here rook b1 is not best. I think best is developing the star squared bishop, and I would still have this huge attack. But let's look at rook to b1, then bishop f6, queen c4, knight out. And here we can see that I'm threatening to capture his rook, and I have possible checkmate threats as well. If he moves the rook out of the way, then I even have chances of check and winning the queen. If the queen hadn't moved to c4, maybe some other square, if he had seen this far ahead, then I could take the rook. So that is not something that he really would want to go in for. And my opponent is, pretty smart. He is a 5 master, very strong. So he's going to see stuff like that. So therefore he didn't take the bait and did not grab my rook. Instead, queen f3. And here if I take his rook, I get nothing better than a draw, because I take his rook, bishop takes my rook, and I can take here. Well, let me just show you real fast. Yeah, if I take, then bishop takes, queen takes, queen takes. So we can see here that 2 minor pieces for 2 minor pieces, but my knight is going to have a hard time getting out of the corner. So in fact it might be white who has the edge here. Therefore I did not want to take the rook either. So it's really funny that both of us have hanging rooks here, but neither of us can take them because they're both poisoned. So instead of that, I retreat my knight to d4. And here his best chance was to play queen g2. It's an odd looking move, putting the queen in front of the king and, lining up for possible threats like bishop h3. So it is a bit strange, but it does allow this bishop some more room to retreat. After that I would play rook to b8, and the computer says I am up by about 1/3 of a pawn here. So that would have been interesting. He would have escaped a lot of the tactics at that point. Bishop's actually still on e7 here. I forgot to reset that. Okay, bishop e7 and queen d5, trade off the queens, rook d8. So my rook is finally safe, but after his bishop is forced to retreat, we can see that I end up winning a minor piece by force. If rook to e1, knight forks, rook to d1, and I attack the rook and bishop at the same time. So here he continues with bishop f4, and I go on to win this. It's still pretty tough to win. I'm only up the exchange, and he is refusing to trade off pieces. Trading off pieces would make my material advantage easier to bring home the game. So after bishop d2, I just play good moves, getting my pieces into the game. Rook c1, bishop e5. So I'm just taking some precautions here, making sure I'm not going to be checkmated on the back rank. Again offering a trade, and again he wisely declines. Bishop f3. There is an idea behind this move. He's threatening now to take on a5. Rook to a8 doesn't work out that well. Because he can just play bishop takes rook, so I play rook d6. And the idea, if bishop takes, rook moves over and I win the piece. So he plays b3 to defend a knight to try and win the pawn the next move. And here he plays bishop b7. You know, he's against trading off. He could take this pawn in a5, but then I have knight to d4. And in fact, I would win the pawn back. This is pretty awesome. So if he did take here, knight attacks rook, bishop, I take, rook captures, and I have check. The king would be forced to g2, and rook a1 would allow me to win back the pawn that I lost and remain up a full exchange. So that was my idea behind that move. He declined to go into that variation and instead played bishop out to b7. Then knight d4, rook takes, and in this variation also I was able to avoid dropping a pawn. Here after rook takes c5, knight takes b3, what do you play? Bishop a6, and now there is a checkmate that will follow up. So he went ahead and resigned here. This was an exciting game, probably one of the best games that I played against a chess master, and I had a lot of fun at the tournament.